In 13 days, Nicolas Cage steps back into a trench coat. It's going to be 8 episodes, 1930s New York, sweatshops, prohibition, rise in Nazism, and on paper, this thing should be one of the most ambitious superhero projects of the decade. The show could redefine the prestige of superhero television as we know. And the thing is, every single episode releases in 2 versions, an authentic black and white cut and a colorized hue cut. So this stylistically makes this one of the most ambitious releases in a live action superhero project that's been attempted. But the show might be different than it was originally written, and one of the co-creators of Spider-Man Noir actually highlighted this point, that there are some creative differences between the original character and what's going to be on the Amazon Prime series. So today, we're going to actually look at some of the points that the creator made, and whether or not they might be important or not. I'm Kai the comic guy, and it's time for a deep dive. So one of the creators we're talking about is Fabrice Sapolsky. French-born, started reading comic books at 6 years old. Sapolsky established the first French newsstand magazine, dedicated entirely to comic books back in 1998. It wasn't until 2006 he had an idea. What if Spider-Man was a Depression-era pulp hero? He pitched it to his co-creator David Hine, and Marvel said yes. And the rest is pretty much history. Spider-Man Noir hit shelves in 2008 with a February 2009 cover date, with Carmen doing the art, Marco doing the costume design. It was a cult hit immediately. It spawned a sequel, Eyes Without a Face. It's even spawned a video game, with animated cameos, the whole 9. Fast forward, Nicolas Cage wound up voicing Spider-Man Noir during the movie Into the Spider-Verse in 2018, and the character went mainstream. So, Amazon ordered 8 episodes, a live-action series with Cage in a lead role, which releases on May 25th. Some of you may be watching this video after the release. And in March of this year, at the Emerald City Comic Con, Sapolsky sat down with the Popverse editor, and they talked about the series. The co-creator had some things to say, and I'm just going to paraphrase here. So what was said basically is that this was a different product altogether, and that Sony and Amazon Prime had created something that is not exactly what the creator had intended. They don't even have the same name. There is a lot of red tape there, and that the reason why the main character was changed, possibly Peter Parker to Ben Reilly, was likely due to one of those legal issues, and also why the character is barely recognizable to the original. The line that caught me by surprise was the fact that he didn't create a character with a stupid hat. He takes Peter Parker's story seriously. This is a guy who's active in the industry, going on record at a major convention to say that his name isn't attached to something that he doesn't recognize. Let me show you what he actually means by that, because if you've only seen the trailers, you only know half the story. Here's where the casual viewer is going to be surprised. The comic Spider-Man Noir isn't what you think it is. Yeah, there's the coat, the goggles, and the black and white mood board of New York, and that's all real, but what made the comic matter, what made critics call it one of the most interesting Spider-Man stories in the late 2000s, is the political guts underneath. Aunt May in this universe is a labor activist. She gives public speeches in Central Park. She runs a homeless shelter called the Bowery Welfare Center alongside Peter. She's basically a political activist with socialist views. Uncle Ben is a World War I airman, and he has deeply anti-war political views. And his foundational line to Peter is a little different than one that we're used to. It replaces "with great power comes great responsibility." Instead, Uncle Ben tells Peter this: if those in power can't be trusted, it's the responsibility of the people to remove them. That's not a Spider-Man line that we're used to. Peter Parker Noir doesn't become Spider-Man because of personal guilt. He becomes Spider-Man because his uncle was murdered for organizing a labor strike at one of the Norman Osborn sweatshops. Another point of emphasis is the way Uncle Ben actually dies, and I must say it's a little horrific. And Adrian Toomes, also known as the Vulture, a former carnival sideshow performer who's developed a taste for human flesh, just eats him. They lie to young Peter and tell him a dog mauled him. A little bit darker for sure. This dark, politically loaded, intentional, uncomfortable Spider-Man, the kind of Spider-Man who picks up a gun, the kind whose own Aunt May, after he shoots the Vulture to save her, looks at him in the eye and tells him he's no better than the men he's hunting. This is the comic that Sapolsky created. And if that wasn't enough so far, I'm going to add more to the plate. African Americans are not only facing racism, but they're being abducted in a project funded by the Nazis, where they're being experimented on to further genetic research. They're essentially being lobotomized by Dr. Octavius, whom in this universe has a congenital defect. So along with all the capital issues and dealing with the mob, whom is essentially the goblins, you also have social barriers and social conflicts in the Spider Noir series. So that's kind of what he means when he says there's a lot of social issues that we were addressing at the time through the project that might have possibly be erased in this version. Now let's talk about the contrast. What do we know currently about the show? Nicolas Cage is Ben Reilly, not Peter Parker, and Cage is playing an aging, jaded, alcoholic private investigator who used to be the city's only hero. But he wound up walking away after some kind of personal tragedy, and now has to reckon with his past. Cage himself has said he's playing the character as 70% Humphrey Bogart and 30% Bugs Bunny. And Lord and Miller described Ben as having dealt with a lot of baggage years before episode 1 even starts. Remember I said earlier the show drops in black and white and also a colorized hue version of every episode. Cage compared the color version to Edward Hopper's Nighthawks, which is honestly a pretty cool reference and is genuinely innovative and a pretty effective release strategy. But notice what's missing from every piece of the marketing so far. The strikes, the labor, the activism, the sweatshops, the socialist Aunt May, the capital versus the labor. That's not in the trailers, and that's not in the press kit, and that's not what the show is selling. Maybe that's exactly what Sapolsky is pointing out. A lot of these social issues have not been directly in the trailer. Now, to be fair to the show, we don't know exactly what's in these episodes until they release, so I'm going to hold my opinion for now. Here's the thing about Peter Parker. Peter Parker is one of the most valuable single pieces of intellectual property on the planet, and the legal map around him is insane. Disney owns the comic character, Marvel controls the MCU version, and Sony has the film rights. Sony Pictures is making this show with MGM and Amazon. Throw in the Spider-Verse animated continuity, which is in its own legal lane, and you got a character with multiple corporate parents who all have to sign off on what he does, how he talks, and what his politics can or can't carry. Ben Reilly is an established Spider Family character, Clone Saga, Scarlet Spider, whose rich history, and he has significantly less load bearing in a corporate IP machine. You can put Ben Reilly in the 1930s Noir series without 10 lawyers and 3 executive committees rewriting every line of his characterization. He gives the show creative breathing room, and that's not a small thing. Sapolsky himself actually acknowledged this and said he understands there's a lot of legal issues there. He's not naive about why these changes have happened. He's saying that there's both a legal reality and a creative loss. Now let's talk about the hat. Yeah, technically Sapolsky's right. In the original 2009 design, he used Uncle Ben's War 101 airman gear, not a fedora. The fedora came in later. Shattered Dimensions in 2010, then definitively in 2018. Half the people watching the show are watching it because they fell in love with Cage's character back in 2018. Hat and all. We all have to realize that adaptations do evolve, and that's the deal. So let's talk about what gets lost. Sapolsky's real complaint isn't about the hat. The real concern is the politics, Depression-era social commentary. Aunt May, who organizes workers, Uncle Ben, who dies for striking, and the reading of Spider-Man as an anti-capitalist, radically fighting industrialists who treat human beings as disposable parts. And that's what we have to remember. The reading is what gives the comics weight. It's why critics paid attention. It's why it became a breakout of the entire Marvel Noir line. So the real question is, will they change too much, or whether the show is brave enough to carry the soul of the comic while still doing its own thing? Whether it picks up the labor politics or quietly walks past them. Lord and Miller have done a great job in the Spider-Verse films. They're not allergic to thematic substance. I'm cautiously hopeful. Do you agree with Sapolsky? Does the co-creator have a point? Or give Sony and Prime the benefit of the doubt and watch the show. Also, hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Hit that bell so that you don't miss the reaction breakdown, and I'll see you on launch day. Keep your feet on the ground in your eyes on the stars. Excelsior, my fellow nerds. Kai out.